Michael McCormick. I'm the Executive Director of the Livingston Food Resource Center. And good to see all of you here. And I think a topic that, we've got an hour and a half to discuss what I'm sure we could sit in this room and talk about productively for a week. So let's see if I can keep us on track, right, and on time. I'll do my best. Did they have it right in 1950? I'm old enough to remember 1950, so I think so. I was just saying to Nancy, I grew up in a Leave It to Beaver household, and I think we had it right at that time. Some of you don't know who Beaver was. So rebuilding a community-based food system as opposed to the commodity export food system that Montana has evolved to since the 50s. And what we're going to do initially here, we're going to go through the panel, and each panel member is going to introduce themselves and talk briefly about their role in our food system, the role they play, the impact that they have, and give us just a brief overview of what they see as the challenges and opportunities and what they'd like to see us achieve as our goal with our Montana food system. And then Nancy Matheson is going to give us some historical perspective on the subject, talk a bit about regional capacity for processing, aggregation, and distribution. And then I'll do a brief review of what we're doing in Livingston at a local level, all right, relative to the local food system. And then the bulk of the time is going to be spent addressing several kind of broad questions that our hope is that they will precipitate some really good conversation and discussion. This is meant to be an audience participation hour and a half, so don't be bashful. We're counting on you for good ideas, good questions, and that's how we'll spend the bulk of our time together. And then we'll summarize, and everybody, I hope, is taking notes, so when you go to the follow-up session on how do we proceed, where do we go from here, you've got lots of good ideas and things to say in that session. So let's start with the panel introduction. Of each panel member will take 5 minutes or so and introduce yourself. Okay. Start with Nancy.
I'm Nancy Matheson, and I grew up on a dryland grain farm east of Conrad, Montana. And I worked in the nonprofit sector most of my career, and including AERO. I was the Sustainable Ag Coordinator for AERO. I worked there for 13 years. And that's during the time of farm improvement clubs. And, we moved from farm improvement clubs into food more recently. So, yeah, I'm probably the second oldest person here.
Why are you looking at me?
Is that, you just want it?
That's perfect.
I'm Randy Lindbergh. My wife Nancy and I formed Quality Foods Distributing almost exactly 9 years ago, and our son Rob joined us about 4 years ago. We're a distributor, as the name implies. Quality Foods is a distributor of natural, organic, local, and regional products. We supply products from about 125 different suppliers. Of that 125, about 2/3 of those are Montana or Northern Rockies based. We carry about 1,800 unique items. In terms of the local products that we carry, the categories include fresh produce from all areas of the state, local protein, beef, bison, pork, lamb, seafood, bulk grains, flours, lentils, primarily from the Golden Triangle area up there. Retail type products, both refrigerated, frozen, and dry grocery. Want to leave an added category in there? That's about it. We've got a variety of customers. Our customers are independent retail and natural food stores, grocery stores, specialty food stores. The universities here, MSU, University of Montana, are tremendous supporters of ours. Hotels, restaurants, the tourist areas, the national parks in our area, Yellowstone, Grand Teton, Glacier National Parks, fly fishing lodges, guest ranches, ski resorts, caterers. We have a number of different types of customer types. Our trucks, we delivered those customers with our own fleet of refrigerated trucks pretty much throughout Montana, at least the major cities, an awful lot of minor cities. Our customers get weekly delivery service. And sometimes in certain areas we give twice week delivery service. Mentioned Montana, we have a truck that goes down into Jackson Hole once a week, and we come up in southeast Montana, Idaho. The other category I forgot was fresh dairy. We distribute the Kalispell Creamery line. In addition to the fresh dairy, we have fresh deli and a number of artisan cheese and things like that. That's kind of where we are.
My name is Campbell. I am currently the operations manager for the Western Montana Growers Cooperative. I've only been in this position for about a year now, and just the more I dive in, the more I learn about food systems. And I kind of ended up here accidentally. I had no intention of going into agriculture. My background is not in that at all. But I took a permaculture design course, and it got me really interested in local food, local systems particularly. And after that, I worked for Kaly actually at Harlequin Produce for about 4 years, and was involved with their daily on-farm operations, their CSA program, and then went to the co-op. It was kind of a next step in that whole food chain system, and I'm just really excited to be here and learn more about the whole system and the agriculture and the key players in Montana.
My name is Kaylee Hess. I'm here with Harlequin Produce. I run Harlequin Produce with my partner Brian. We're located out of Arlee, Montana. We're a 30-acre certified organic vegetable farm. We have about 15 acres in cover crops and 15 in vegetables. I like to say we grow assortment of the classics. So tomatoes, peppers, melons. We grow a lot of storage crops, beets and carrots and onions. We market through the Western Montana Growers Cooperative. We run a 225-member CSA program, and then we sell at the Clark Fork Farmers Market every Saturday. And we employ about 8 people full-time and 1.5 2 people year-round.
My name is Tommy Bass. I actually work with Montana State University Extension, primarily in areas of conservation and environmental management related to livestock production. But in the last couple years, I've joined a research initiative actually funded by USDA called Agriculture of the Middle. And myself and a colleague in Oregon and a colleague in Colorado represent a subcommittee there. We're very interested in the role of local regional meats in a renewed agriculture of the middle. So a system that takes advantage of certain economies of scale, but then also can honor production and value chain expectations, of a better raised local regional product. So spent the last couple of years reading and discussing and launching sort of a research and extension program in that area relative to meats.
My name is Brittany Steckler, and I'm the general manager of the Yellowstone Valley Food Hub out of Billings. We are 12 farmers and ranchers who have formed a co-op just this year. Although we're many years in the making, we were incubated by Northern Plains Resource Council. And so over 10 plus years, they've been trying to get local farmers and ranchers together. And I came on as one of the first vegetable producers with 3 other regenerative cattle producers. And now we've grown to 12 who are farmer members. We have some others who, though, have joined the ranks, but they can't actually be a member because they don't sell raw agricultural commodities. But my background, I grew up in Lewistown on a dryland crop operation, and my family, my mom now ranches in Nye. And so I have some of this in my background, but the aggregating, distributing, bringing all that together is still quite new for all of us. So glad to be here.
Let's go through the panel one more time quickly, and I ask each of you to state as succinctly as you can relative to the subject of rebuilding a community-based food system. What goal, what would you like to see accomplished in the next 5 years, let's say 5 years from now? Anybody jump in first?
Well, I would say I'd like to see an even larger percent of Montana food being eaten in Montana and in great variety.
Okay. Who else? Randy, any thought?
I think just continue with the awareness of local food products, Montana-based producers and those types of things. I mentioned we do a lot of business with both MSU and University of Montana, and they're wonderful supporters. But I talked about this at a meeting we were both at a couple of days ago. You go the next level down. You go talk to the MSU Northern in Havre. You go talk to Western in Dell. It's like local foods. It's like local schmokel. I just want it cheap. And there just isn't that awareness there. There just isn't that. It's just not an important subject to them. And I would love to see just the continuation of the advantage of the local food systems, supporting local producers. There's some great examples of that on the private side. Yellowstone National Park and the concessionaires there, Xanterra Parks and Resort. They got sustainability criteria, and they've got to have X amount of their product purchased within a certain radius, and it's got to be local, grown in that area, or it's got to be organic. And they really work at those kind of things. Again, that's the private side, and there are other examples of doing that. But you think, boy, a state operation, like some of these universities, that boy, we just can't get them interested.
Casey.
I think I would really like to see us addressing the food system as a whole comprehensive unit that addresses economic, environmental, social impacts to not only farmers and producers, ranchers, but all the way to the customers in social justice, health and well-being, nutrition for Montanans without as much access. And also from a distributor, and like to see a little more collaboration between pretty much everyone locally in Montana to how we can work together to kind of combat, build allies amongst ourselves and how to combat these external players that are corporate and imported goods.
I guess if I think about our food system in the next 5 years, I would like to see a food system that is where more local food is in everyday Montanans' kitchens. And this kind of goes on to what Randy said, but I feel like we as, just speaking from a producer level, or a producer who does a lot of wholesaling, I think some of those low-hanging fruit markets have been met. So those are your natural food stores, the people you don't have to twist the arm to get them to buy local produce. I would like to see local produce be, the distribution of local produce to be expanded. I think, and from the producer side, I would like to see producers being able to grow what is easy for them to grow and what they're good at growing and be able to sell that, instead of having to enter this market where those high-end markets are more full, and so people are kind of forced to grow some crops that are maybe not entirely suited to our climate, our pretty short season climate. And I think to do that, we have to start looking at trying to get some of those core staple crops, talking about and thinking about how to expand the market potential for those crops.
So from let's just to keep it simple, say from a beef standpoint, local regional beef, I'd like to see a few things in in the next 5 years, I'd like to see if it's feasible for more strategic supply chain management by ranchers that want to have a privately branded product. So that'd be their relationship with a processor that meets their needs and quality needs, perhaps an aggregator distributor to reduce their transportation expense and efficiencies, and then the appropriate markets that they can capture the premium and price. And maybe the pie in the sky is to see all this happen where some economies of scale are realized so that these products can also be competitive or available or accessible to a broader swath of consumers and not just the economically privileged. Something else I'd like to see perhaps more on the ranching end, particularly for ranchers that want to work at this local regional level and ag of the middle, is can we break free of some of the traditional calving beliefs and schedules and intervals to try and spread out when we have finished cattle coming to market, whether that be forage or grass finished or finished in a feedlot. So I'm really curious about learning about spatial, temporal, time and space efficiencies in the supply chain, and then wanting to be able to get that out as education to all the players in a local meat value chain.
I'm so glad to be sitting here with Thomas because the Yellowstone Valley Food Hub really needs to address meat processing. That's where a lot of our cost comes in. We still have butchers who are paying hired hands, and it's actually a fairly skilled position. There's a lot of knowledge that goes into it, a lot of training, but there's a lot of turnover, and we don't have this $1 million facility that does it all automated, like it's all automated. So there's a plus side. We have more jobs, in slaughterhouses and butcher shops here. However, it means that the meat, when it actually gets to the consumer, is more expensive because of that. It's still cheaper to ship it to the Midwest, have it processed, and ship it back. So that's one of the things that we can't really survive unless we address this. And it also makes us really vulnerable to when the 4 meat packers in the country decide to control the price, when one of them has a fire, when, anything that's been happening in recent events, our whole system is susceptible. But making that localized and yet not making it this bougie thing is tricky.
Good, thank you. How about, from all of you sitting out here, anybody have a 5-year goal you'd like to state that we can discuss? There's a hand up in the back.
Hey, Michael.
Hey!
I'm here with Western Sustainability Exchange, and another hat I wear is also Barney Creek Livestock. We are a regenerative agricultural producer in the Paradise Valley. And what we've run into a lot, and I'm wondering if it's in your 5-year plan or on anyone's radar, about second homers and land access. We have a lot of, obviously, Paradise Valley, come in, buy a lot of land, and then just let it sit. And we're trying to figure out tactics or ways to explain the way that we ranch is actually starts with soil health all the way to the plate. So in representing WSC, we have a lot of producers that are the same, doing the same operation we are all around the state. So I think if it's not on someone's radar, it'd be great if it was, because we've already changed calving dates, we've done a lot of stuff, but we can't grow if we can't lease more land. So that's a sticking point for us.
Makes me... All right, let's turn it over to Nancy for 10 minutes or so, whatever you need, Nancy, to give us the historical perspective.
Okay. So this starts with before I was born. Yeah, Montana has a really interesting food and egg history. Up through the 1950s, 70% of the food Montana produced was eaten in Montana. I have to check my notes here. and we also produced a great variety, I mean, and not just raw agricultural products, but cheeses, butter, a lot of processed fruits and vegetables, and we even exported those products, which was a surprise to me that we could do that. So, you know, our typical raw products are wheat and beef, and we always exported those, and we still do. But we also did more different kinds of livestock. I know that in Conrad, we had a turkey cooperative, and it was the biggest turkey cooperative in the country, and Conrad shipped in train car loads of turkeys, live turkeys, out of state. So
They were shipped out live to be processed out of state.
Yeah. Okay, so they'd be fresher. So as early agriculture developed and transportation got easier, then we started, we started shipping more, and farmers started producing more for export, and instead of for Montana. And again, that was predominantly wheat and beef. But once we started exporting, we lost our food processing sector, because that 70% of the food Montanans ate was processed in Montana. So the export market sort of killed the processing capacity that we had built. Montana was able, and still is able, to produce a year-round complete nutritional diet. But we still, even to this day, can't produce that variety in the quantity that would feed all of Montanans year-round. So there's some things that we could start doing now, I think, that would enable us to do that. So more recently, the growth in popularity in local food, we went through a dark time where the county sanitarians weren't used to farmers producing food for sale, food products for sale. And there was a lot of, no, you can't do that, even fairly quite recently. So in fact, it became apparent that some of the sanitarians were afraid of food that was grown in dirt and outdoors. I mean, seriously, they were like stunned that food was grown outside, where it was susceptible. So Montana's whole effort to start producing more food for Montanans hit these roadblocks of the sanitarians. And it turns out that the food laws had been amended over decades until it was a complete confusing patchwork. And so the sanitarians were having to interpret what the laws meant. And so they would interpret them pretty much as conservatively as they could. So, just during the last 20 years, we had the means to produce our own food, but not the permission to do that. So in the 2015 legislative session, Representative Kathleen Williams introduced a bill that would fix that. So we actually ended up there's three state agencies that govern food, and it's Health, Department of Health, Department of Agriculture, which regulates raw agricultural products, and then the Department of Livestock, which does meat, milk, eggs. So we got all those three entities together to try to work out and fix the laws so that people could actually produce those products. And we were successful, though not entirely, because there are still some things that I think AERO, along with some other groups, could put some pressure on and change some laws so that those products, those things can be sold. And those things that still aren't fixed. The egg laws need to be fixed. The poultry slaughter laws need to be fixed. What was my third one? Sorry. Eggs, poultry, and I forget. I'll come back to me.
Pardon, I feel like maybe the audience has an answer. A couple years ago, the milk inspection was somewhat threatened in the state in a way that would have adversely affected some of our independent entrepreneurial dairies like Kalispell and Lifeline.
Okay.
I'm unaware of the status of that at the moment, but it speaks to needing access to fair and evenly applied inspection.
So, but what has happened more recently is a complete rewrite of the food laws. And those three agencies, Health, Ag, and Livestock, collaborated and did listening sessions all over Montana from comments from everybody from sanitarians to businesses like yours. And so there was a Food Modernization Act that passed the 2015 legislature. So things are much simpler now, and I think we can really, we're already starting to see growth in a lot more food businesses. I think Representative Williams has counted how many new businesses have started. It's in the 20s something. So just getting rid of old laws and people who were entrenched in those agencies. One of the big factors was that a lot of those people retired about 2014-15. And the younger people in those agencies were much more open to doing as many things as we could.
Now, Michael, something that's just more of a frustration as a distributor or someone that wants to support producers and growers and things like that, and hurdles that you hit. I guess, taking on Tommy's comments a little bit about the protein sector. I've just had a couple conversations just in the last couple weeks. This guy out of Bridger, I think, he's got some just superior Berkshire hogs. Says, I got a great product here. Everybody says the best hog you'll ever taste. I just need distribution. Somebody else out of, I think, Lewistown or something like that, has some great cattle products. Same thing, he's got a great product, he's got a great message, he's done some marketing on it, but I just need distribution. Well, we can provide distribution, and give me your distributor price list. And the problem is they have a price list, and it's wholesale, it's the farmer's market, it's distributor, whatever. And I've got to tell these guys, I would love to support you, but I've got to put a margin on that. And our customers, whether they're food service customers, they're retail customers, they're willing to pay more for local because they like that aspect. They like that menu marketing, that they can promote that, but they won't overpay on it. And I guess the problem is just scale in Montana, the size of many of these operations. I've heard somebody mention here, a lot of producers shipping their product to Colorado to have it processed, and then coming back here. They say, my yield's better. Even paying the transportation, it's more economical for you. Again, this is an area I have no expertise in. Just on as a frustration, as somebody that would love to support these guys, but it's just I can't. I just can't sell it at that price.
Is the issue with processing meat that? Because there's these very large meat processing facilities, I guess, is it a regulatory thing that causes it to be, or is it just the function of scale, or both?
Both could be at play. And Montana is unique, and it's really a superlative statistic in the number of small and very small meat processors we have around the state. So in theory, there is access. I think there sits around 20 to 22 state-inspected plants that can process beef product that's retail legal amongst a variety of markets, and 3 to 4 USDA plants. So that allows a retail product to cross state lines. So many of those are only doing, fewer than 10 head of beef per week, but 4 or 5 can start to service a larger market. So we have access to inspection here in the state. A lot of states do not. A lot of states don't have a state program. They rely solely on USDA inspection. USDA is not that interested in going to a very small plant and maybe only slaughters once a week. So there is that. I think your other issue was scale, was it? Inspection and scale. I mean, they can be interrelated, but one of the things I want to study are these concepts of scale.
But it's all labor intensive. So you're running a small business and you have to pay at least $15 an hour just to get someone interested. I mean, who wants to be a butcher?
Right.
I mean,
and then if it's part-time.
With maybe benefits.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just also paying the labor aspect, I think.
Yeah,
at least in our area.
Local processors across the Northern Rockies and Pacific Northwest, so comparable sorts of environments and markets, struggle with labor. Retaining labor, training somebody up, and then having them leave. And, obviously, right now we're in a construction boom across this valley and other places. If the Bakken fires back up again, I mean, that's the same sort of sector of labor that you'd be trying to attract into, a smaller to ag of the middle scale meat processing plant. And then, of course, all of these efficiencies lead to the reason conventional ground beef is $2.99 a pound, and the best negotiated price I've really seen for a local beef product is $4.99 a pound, and it usually hovers closer to $7 or $8. But you would know better.
I can get you some cheaper. Slightly, not much, but slightly cheaper.
The good news is that there's a market out there for Montana products. And when we've got high-end customers in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, high-end restaurant, they are loving having Gallatin Valley grown produce to serve in their restaurants and things like that, and meat products and artisan cheeses, things like that. Same with our customers in Idaho. Market's there, and there's some items that kind of fit, the pricing works and everything else. There's a lot of it's just I'm just priced out.
So how much of the cost, so then I assume that the reason why it's $2.99 a pound for the traditional stuff is also because of subsidies, right? Farm subsidies on grain and corn
For
feed.
different animals versus.
Possibly. I mean, there's also the amount of time and effort, say, that goes into a grass-finished steer we're looking at 20, 22 months.
And less weight.
And a little bit smaller filled-out frame. And then, so it's almost twice as old as a feedlot finished animal. Producer carried the risk of something happening, accident, disease, predator, the labor and feed into that over almost twice as long. From the processing side, the big conventional national processors, their labor is so cheap. And they're, recruiting immigrant labor that is paid very little, paid the minimum. And it's really hard then when a small to medium-sized plant is striving to pay for high-quality labor a fair wage. So all of these things end up being reflected in, obviously, the final cost of the product.
What I wonder too is when we talk about local, a 50-mile radius. I mean, Joel Salatin, Polyface Farms just finally broke out of this, right? It was huge on our scene that he was finally like, I have to ship farther now, and he held out forever. But I'm wondering when we have this conversation about Montana, and the reason we're trying to keep it just within Livingston and maybe Bozeman, but we have a lot of producers that we collaborate with that are already in this certain market, so whatever. But I think that when we talk about local and keeping it affordable within that 50-mile radius, what does that look like? And if everybody, Utopia, kept within their 50 to 100 miles, we wouldn't have to worry about, you know, when you're trying to make a profit, the shipping, which is just a huge input. So what is that? And you know, you guys mentioned that a lot, like, you know, in your opening statements about trying to keep that. So what's that part of the puzzle for Montana?
I think that's a really legitimate question and a definition to try to come to, because politically, legislatively, it makes sense to do it within state lines. For Montana, over in Missoula, we're closer to ship to Idaho, Spokane, some of the West Coast than we are to Billings. So then what does local mean for us? And what is your total range that you're willing to ship or to transport? So I don't have a good answer for it, but I think it's a legitimate question and something that's worth talking about for sure.
But then you get out in eastern Montana, and I'm an hour and a half from just where like us producers come together to aggregate on farm. And I have someone coming down from the Fort Peck Indian Reservation, and we have someone else in Sweetgrass County. And so we just, you know, because that's where the population density is in Billings. So I guess what it takes though to maybe stay closer to home for us is just having more people support us. Like we just need to sell more ground beef.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about buy local, like what we've really run into and a lot of our producers run into is we are such a customer convenient, you know, shopper.
Yep.
That they would rather just go run down to the store and get the pound instead of buying an eighth, a quarter, you know. So how do we think outside the box store, right? And do some of these food hub things or CSA boxes or, I don't know.
Your perspective, so it's easy for me to get food from friends of mine that grow beef. I can get a lamb, I can get a half beef. But then my local natural food store, Real Food Market in Helena, actually hires a butcher and is trying to sell local meat. Of course, that doubles the price. So what is my commitment to a local food system? Am I willing to go pay $8 a pound or $7 a pound because I'm supporting the local rancher, I'm supporting the butcher in my store? So in this whole question of demand and inconvenience and only rich people can do the local food thing, I mean, to really challenge that and say, if I really want, so how does my community, you asked for, how does my community decide that once in a while, I'm going to spend $8 a pound or, you know, $12 or $15 for a steak instead of $30 for an entree at a restaurant. Then again, I'm taking business away from my local restaurant. But rather than getting my half beef from my friend that's raising it, there's all, you know, all those are supporting local food, but a lot of our friends won't pay that extra price in the natural market. They'll go to Safeway where it's $2.99. How does that change? Because if that doesn't change, these people have our values, but in the end, why am I paying $7 instead of $4? You know?
Yeah, I can make a real quick comment before Todd jumps in. I'm really struck by what I heard on my first panel from Bonnie at CFAC. And they found out, you know, if people just spent 15% of their food income on local food, they would have $66 million worth of local food purchased in just along the 93 corridor on Western Montana. So I think we need to not look at it so like black and white, and it's just every little bit actually helps and like adds up and accumulates. And it's not just, I don't know, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Anyway, sorry.
Well, I want to come back to something Randy said here a moment ago. I think, if I heard you correctly, you said the market is there.
The market is there.
That sounds contradictory to the position, I think, that Max
I think my store's having trouble moving that meat.
No.
Well, I think for, you know, it is a niche. And for a store like Real Food Store, we sell them protein products. For them, it's a competitive differentiator. than going to the Safeway or the Albertsons or something like that that doesn't have that kind of product. And there's a certain number of consumers, more and more, that will pay a premium for that because they want to support Montana. They like the ethics of grass-fed, grass-finished, and things like that. And same with restaurants that we deal with. We call it menu marketing. Is I've got grass-fed beef or non-GMO, whatever it might be, organic produce, whatever it might be, and they've got customers that are willing to pay that premium because they want to support that. Mentioning produce in terms of transportation costs and things like that, a lot of local produce tends to be hyper-local. If you look at the Gallatin Valley here, we've got a lot of very small growers. And they've connected with certain restaurants in town. They do their CSA, they do their farmers market, and that's kind of all the business that they can handle, and that's just fine. That's all they want to do. Got a lot of growers, they've got excess capacity, but when we sell their product, we sell it to the customer in Bozeman at the same price we sell it to a customer in Kalispell. We don't tack on freight. It's the price in our catalog is the price in our catalog. So there is no freight differential for the areas that we go into.
There's a hand up, thank you.
Yeah, I think marketing is a key to this because we're talking about beef and $2.99 beef and $7 beef, but not all beef is the same, right? The nutritional profile of grass-fed beef versus feedlot beef, those are two different products. I think in these discussions we talk about, well, how do we put downward price pressure on the rancher to be competitive with a subsidized automated industry? I don't think you can do that. I don't think that's where the answer lies. I think you have to make the customer more aware of, yes, you can have subsidized corn-fed automated beef for that price or beef with different values in it for a little bit higher. I feel like that's got to be a part of it all than just looking at the price only.
I was just going to comment that I think you're absolutely right about it. It is a different product, and you can't compare it. When my cousin raises grass-fed Wagyu beef by Bernie, and when we were trying to create a market for her in Red Lodge, we worked with a couple of our local chefs to do taste tests. We bought beef from the grocery store, commodity, wherever that comes from, and then we served it side by side with her beef. And it wasn't the same product at all. And everybody could tell that when they could look at the difference in the color and the marbling, and they could taste the difference. And all of a sudden people were willing to buy it then because they realized they shouldn't compare it to what they're buying in the grocery store because it's not the same thing.
And I didn't hesitate to eat the beef tartare.
Oh, I didn't either,
I knew.
which I was scared to death of before.
Yeah.
So
But
there's another aspect to the difference, which is not, I mean, there's the nutritional part and all that, but also just the sustainable part, because the $2.99 beef has got Roundup, has been sprayed on the feed, the corn and the soy, whatever, is all saturated in that. All that has been run off into the Gulf of Mexico or wherever. And plus all the, the large pools of manure and all that gets flushed into the waterways, and it's causing algae blooms, and so there's all kinds of environmental issues that people may be concerned about, and then also just how it's handled and processed and whether it's humane or not. I mean, I think that people have a lot of concerns about all those things.
Can I throw out an idea that I think might work in this train of conversation? It's something I've just started to think about this. It's the end of my season. I've not had a lot of spare time, but I think it does come back to marketing. And I've been thinking about that there could be a benefit to, I was thinking about it just from like a producer's level, but like a Montana Producers Trade Association. But hearing this conversation of livestock, I wonder if it should be more of like a Montana Growers Association. And we pay dues, and our whole point of our organization is marketing. And we're not marketing our individual brands, we're marketing our Montana product to Montanans. Mm-hmm. And with that idea of we just have to get people to think for a moment, where did this food come from? And you just got to keep putting that into people's minds. Where did it come from? And so excuse me, I'm going to finish. And so then eventually you might have people who are willing to spend a little bit more of their 10% budget that they spend on food to buying Montana products. And I think, I mean, I would like to, I guess if there's anything that could come out of this is to talk with somebody who, form a group who could start thinking about like what would that mean to just market that concept, you know, and with that you're marketing that concept, but then with that would be information on like, okay, now you need to talk to these distributors. This person in this region can get you this product, you know, and we filter it out into all these groups that are kind of starting. But it's just strictly marketing. We're just only paying for marketing. We're not marketing our individual farms. We are marketing our Montana grown product.
It's just a drumbeat of info.
Yeah.
you know,
Over
I
and
think-
over. So simple too.
But what's the difference in that? And we were just in a panel with, is the discussion around is the buy local working? And I guess I'm just curious if just telling people about where things are coming from is really creating much change, or what to focus on.
Okay, so I forgot a little piece of that. With that would be, our prerogative would also be identifying produce managers, institutional buyers, like those people that are already purchasing, but then the next people that we think are the easiest access. And all of, you know, this is a big network of people, but I think it can't be as broad, because I think you've got to have gateway crops, you know, you've got to have gateway meat products, and you also have to have the person who has the power to bring the product into that market. And that, I think, is like a regional informational sharing, where it's like, I've been working on this person, they're getting close, you know, like I can get them ground beef for $5.99, you know, and working with your producers to be like, this is a new account, can you do this at this price? And maybe it's gonna be worthwhile because it becomes a big account.
It all comes down to the consumer. I mean, the people who are in charge of making the buying decisions are going to buy what the consumer wants. So, I mean, I think if you look at organic, 20 years ago was probably not the buzzword it is now. And you can go to Safeway and you can get Safeway branded organic things because the marketing and the knowledge and the culture was just developed that we know that organic is more, but it's better for you. And I think local's on the same path. I mean, even just the 4 years I've been here and been working for quality foods, just the conversation is larger and larger and larger, more and more businesses. So I think it'll get there. Just have to keep doing things like this.
I'd like to
Have these
support what she
conversations.
said about the importance of buy Montana and Montana made, because I think what happens with buy local, that gets confused. In our community, buy local to people means shop at the local grocery store, where the product might be from Venezuela, but that's buying local to them. It's not, you know, it gets confused of what buy local means, but buy Montana products is clear.
It's clear. And I think it also might make you like question, well, what is a Montana product?
Right.
Where like a buy local, as you're saying, is we all buy local.
And we need
a
to
lot.
support our local stores. I'm not against that, but I'm just saying it gets confused.
Right.
Even something like the little made in Montana
Yeah.
bug, the grown in Montana bug, that is meaningful.
Right, it is.
And this really came to me, a customer we have in Gardner, Montana, you know, the North Entrance Yellowstone National Park, Gardner Market, the little independent market there, and showing her it was a new hot sauce out of Big Fork, and they put the bug on the back. Oh, you know, why do they do that? She says, our customers are trained to look for that, and it connects with them. And if they've got like items, you know, on a shelf, and this one has a little made in Montana bug, that's when they're gonna buy. You know, and we emphasize that, and we talk about that. Agree 100% on the marketing piece. That's huge. We do a lot of that. And as a distributor too, we do a lot on the sales side of things. When our territory sales manager is talking with executive chefs, again, talking about menu marketing and talking about the advantage. And it's the training on that consumer side too. A lot of the areas we deal in are pretty high-end areas. You have the Big Sky area, you've got some high-end skiers coming in there, Jackson Hole, and that's where she's been the last couple of weeks because the chefs up there are putting together their winter menus for the skiers to hit, you know, mid-December, things like that. And it's what we talk about a lot. A lot of folks we get, and you know, we've got a lot of different products, both, you know, from the produce to the dairy to the retail items. We talk about marketing. What do you have in terms of marketing? Do you even have a website? Do you have at least a decent Facebook page? Do you have a sell sheet? That when my sales rep goes to the store, we call it a leave behind, that talks about your product. Just some nice photos of the product, some bullet points and things like that, something that can go in our catalog. People react to that kind of stuff, and it moves product.
I would just add on to that when we're talking about marketing on this scale, it goes beyond the product itself. While the product is important and you can tell a quality difference, as you said, this is getting at perceived values and benefits, tying into people's emotions. So when you say made in Montana, there's some pride associated, and people have more personal connection to that than just like, oh, what is local, like you said. So I think it's important to look not only at the product, but at the bigger scope and a little bit beyond that, and how to really reach that customer base.
And that's one of the things that I feel like we struggle with a bit with the Yellowstone Valley Food Hub is Eastern Montana is different than Western Montana. And so, we are cautious when we talk about the climate impact of food and really choose our words gently. And we are really mindful of the ways that we, even just some of our customers have been really vocal that they wouldn't support us until we made our split with Northern Plains Resource Council that does quite progressive political lobbying and things like that. So, it's also, we talk a lot about the things that bring us together. We're a diverse group, but reaching our customers and not watering them down, but not turning anyone off, and however, getting at the heart of just, you can be that pride that we have as Montanans and supporting our neighbors is what seems to be congealing us.
Yes.
I'm a customer only, a consumer. I don't grow anything. And I would rather have less beef in a week and have the grass-fed, nutrient-dense product. I would rather know that it was maybe grown on nutrient-rich soil, so that the product that I'm eating actually is good for my family and good for me. So I think the health benefits have to be marketed as well. From the food that's really grown in a way that is good for people. I mean, we are already hearing how people develop diabetes and many of these other diseases, and it's related to the food they eat.
I think health statistics is one of the new entry points. Why are people coming into organic, value-based food? Is from that place.
Yeah, everybody's so dang sick.
Health statistics are troubling, so that's an opportunity.
Well, this is going to feed into this next session that we have, and this is really good, and I appreciate, of course, this is my daughter, so she has some great ideas right now. I'll just make that right now. No, that was a fantastic idea. I mean, if it's going to come from anybody else, but it's true.
I had a really good idea.
We can do that now, but my point is, our job next session is to not walk away again from this great conference with this great energy and these great ideas and all go back to our silos of trying to make, or maybe that is all we can, that could be the outcome of this next session. That is all we can do. This is so hard and it's so competitive, and there's so many factors in the weather of this state and this industry that you're all in, that maybe this is the best we can do. At the same time, there's other states that have worked on, and the Food and Ag Summit that I don't want to forget that we did just 4 years ago, they came out with some really strong recommendations, and one is what is this idea of this Montana Growers Association or some sort of a statewide council. And I know, Nancy, years ago we tried that, and I think Bullock tried it again. It's the matter of just don't have to answer now, but think about, and I hope you join one of these moving forward sessions, think about how could that work in your really busy lives and all the other groups that you're already involved with. Yet, is that possible that that could move us consistently forward? And I think that's our problem, is that we have these great energy sessions and then we just all go home and get back to selling produce or taking a vacation or whatever it might be at this point in time. and then we come back again and talk about this again. So I really hope that we can walk away with this. Some states have these state food plans, and some real successes happen from states that are a lot smaller than ours. This uniqueness of this state and this bigness in small population and arid areas is really super challenging compared to a lot of other states in this country that either they're big, but they have big population centers and can get stuff done. So, I mean, I like this idea, but I keep thinking that's got to be a way. Is it worth trying that again? And Grow Montana is something that we need to resurrect and talk about again.
That's what I was
The
gonna say.
legislation stuff, Thomas, that you're talking about, and the processing issue, this has come up a dozen times. And we need to figure out what is the energy we need and who needs to do that to move some of these absolute roadblocks that we just keep talking about forward.
Well, part of the history of Montana's food system is Grow Montana, which was a broad coalition of interests they're the ones who got the bills passed that would allow for processed foods to be made again in Montana.
Right.
I mean, it had a huge legislative presence and changed a lot of laws in favor of local food, or community-based food systems, I like to call it, because how do you define local? But yeah, I think that, and AERO was a member of Grow Montana as well as NCAT, and individuals were members. And we hired a lobbyist who's still working and would be available. So, you know, pool some funds and get some.
Nancy White at Grow Montana, government?
It's not under, it's just.
Every day should be an AERO conference.
There is a Grow Montana
Talking to each other.
strategy session tomorrow.
Making suggestions.
Okay.
And we've
Done a lot of talking about meat, but you know, there are a lot of people in Montana who are making processed food products. And I just want to mention that there's a food and egg development. There are 4 food and egg development centers in Montana that can help people with food products and marketing. And there's a lot of resources. And those food and egg development centers, there's one in Joliet, there's one in Havre, there's one in Ronan, and Ronan is the one that's got the food processing center. And what's the other one I'm missing? Butte. So those are resources for people who want to tackle, processed food products.
And there's a little one in Livingston. Megan.
Just real quick on the association conversation in Grow Montana. In my previous life, which is County Cop with Michael, ended on Friday, I worked with the Montana Department of Labor and Industry and worked a lot with labor, worked a lot with business and industry, and had the fantastic opportunity to travel across the nation and do facilitate groups called industry sector partnerships. If you want to write down next gen sector partnerships, we have another, because I would want to be a participant, but we have another person that I serve on that national faculty with that we could get as a facilitator to facilitate all growers and producers, from beans to meat, whatever, all the distribution, everybody that's a part of this conversation across the state, to convene that group. And the difference is that the producers, the industry sits in the middle, and we talk about where we want to be, what opportunities we see, and it's a 2-hour lightning facilitated session. We come up with an action plan that's ours. We do it, we own it, but all the resources that, NCATs and AEROs, they are listening, and they figure out how to plug and play their resources into our agenda. And when we're done, when we decide we're done, we're done. But if we want to keep going and we want to keep building, it's on us. And that's the difference. We're not waiting for a certain program. We're not trying to fit into a grant. We're just driving our own stuff. Hawaii has an agricultural one, and Colorado. So if you're interested in that, tie in with me, email me on barneycreek.com, and I can get us going if you decide you guys want to do something like that. But I've seen it work across the nation. It's pretty awesome.
Let me share a couple of comments with you regarding Livingston. Because I think it illustrates some of the things we're talking about, what we've been able to achieve at the Livingston Food Resource Center, which up until about 5 years ago was the Livingston Food Pantry operating out of an old automotive garage and buying and distributing a lot of cheap industrial ultra-processed food to people who we learned through research are suffering from a lot of chronic disease. And I'm talking about people in Livingston and Park County who are living in poverty. And many of the diseases that we saw in this population could be directly related back to diet and nutrition, the lack thereof. And so when I got involved, being a retired corporate capitalist, I wanted to see things done a little differently, and I wanted to stop mailing food money that we were spending buying food. I wanted to stop sending it out of state and investing it in our own economy. So we have shifted our food acquisition buying to Montana farmers. And my definition of local is Montana. I went to a food hub conference several years ago in Atlanta, and I listened to these food hub managers, mostly from the Southeast, talking about how challenging it was to stay in business, to survive. And when I asked them what the biggest hurdle was, they said, well, lack of supply. I don't have enough raw material to develop and distribute the products at a volume that I need to stay in business. And when I asked them, well, how many farmers are you dealing with within, say, a 100-mile radius? Oh, 100, 150. And I'm thinking 150, if they can't make it with 150, I'm toast in Livingston. But so the definition is statewide. All winter long, I do forward contracting with every farmer I can find who will talk to me about it. And I put together memorandums of understanding to buy broccoli, etc. And how many pounds? We just took a delivery from Western Montana Growers Cooperative yesterday, about 1,500 pounds of Montana organic produce. And I'd buy, we had a farmer deliver 2 weeks ago from Fort Shaw, drove all the way down from Fort Shaw with 1,000 pounds of broccoli and winter squash. All of that comes into our commercial kitchen in the Food Resource Center and gets processed, minimally processed, frozen in 1-pound bags for distribution in the food pantry. So people now coming into the food pantry for food assistance get locally grown organic broccoli, beets, carrots, you name it. We also bake our own bread. We're the only food pantry in Montana that bakes its own bread. And I had a professor from the University of Wisconsin tell me recently that we're probably the only food pantry in America that bakes its own bread. And every loaf of that bread is made with organic flour and grain, all grown in Montana. So the food that we now distribute to people in need is Montana food. And I can tell you how much appreciation there is for that when you tell somebody who is living in poverty, and we know through the demographic information we collect that literally 100% of the households we serve are living at or below the poverty level for their size household. They're not accustomed to having access to this kind of food. And when you hand somebody a bag of broccoli that was grown locally and is organic, you can see them light up. And so what we do in our kitchen, we'll bring in food, we process it, we make our own pasta sauces, soups, stews, you name it. And we also do custom processing. We just, this past week, delivered 100 pounds of Montana-grown organic diced beets to the local school system for use in their food programs. We do the same thing for the hospital. We bake the hospital's bread. And while we're doing this, we're also doing culinary training. We prepare people for jobs as restaurant and institution cooks. And our bread is so good that, and the opportunity to leverage that is so good that we are right now building an addition. We're building a bakery, and we're going to begin baking bread for every food pantry in Montana. And the people doing the baking are 2 at-risk apprentices who I've hired because they lack marketable job skills. They're at great risk for continuing to live in poverty. We're going to teach them a trade. And all this is leveraging the food that we've been talking about. So there's so many ways to come at this. You know, when I talk to farmers, and Randy and I have talked about QFD becoming a distributor for our bread around the state. You know, because we're going to be baking wonderful artisan breads and baguettes and what have you, not just the whole wheat bread that we make. So what I'm telling you this because I hope that you will think about new ways to create market. You know, we're talking about marketing. You know, whoever thought of a food pantry as a market for Montana organic farmers? You know, I'll buy probably all in this year 7,000 to 8,000 pounds of organic produce from Montana farmers. It's a new market.
Like, how do you come up with what price you pay for that?
Well, when I do the forward contracting or work with farmers, I tell them, I want the best price you can give me. Best means you make a profit and I can afford it. I want to see you driving a new truck in the fall, right? I'm not trying to beat up farmers and put them out of business. Without those farmers, we don't have a local food system, right? And so I want them to see this as a new market opportunity. And that's how Randy and I talk about it. You know, the income that is generated from the bread sales, for instance, will come right back into our, our organization to help buy from Montana farmers and to train people for jobs. So accessibility and how we think locally about our food system, I think we've got to get so much more creative and aggressive in terms of how we approach this. What are the opportunities?
Michael? I would second the creativity piece to it of what you're saying, whether it's marketing. Don't just think of like marketing the way people think about marketing, but really all the creative ways to get messages out there, back channels, front channels. But the other piece of this, I want to come back to something Nancy said before we leave, which is that our processing capacity got hollowed out. And I'm looking just back to our tour yesterday and going to Root Cellar Foods. And if we want to reach more markets and be creative, if we want to wrap around Bozeman Deaconess and twist their arms until they find a way to get local vegetables back on the chain, we need processing because they're never going to be, yeah, I know. But, you know, you can dream, right? You got to start somewhere. But for institutions, MSU couldn't take a lot of these things until there was a Root Cellar Foods to process the vegetables. But the margins on that are so small that it's a really tough business model. So wrapping around some of these critical nodes in our systems, figuring out how to make them work, because if they go away, we lose some of these foundational buyers that can help bolster the whole system. It's nice to have the foundational high-end resorts and that tourism industry as one piece of the foundation, but that is just serving the rich. And if we want to serve everyone, we need to think about that whole piece and that processing piece. Nancy, I just want to thank you for bringing that piece of history into this room.
If I could share just kind of an end-all story, a very encouraging story. We had a group of dietetic students, dietitians, from MSU. Interns. Taking a tour through our facility a month or two ago, and there's probably 25 young ladies and one guy, just to see what we did and things like that. And towards the end of the tour, the professor who was leading it says, you know, what can we do to support what you guys are doing? I said, be advocates, be champions, you know, be passionate about local foods and things like that. So when you go to work in that hospital or that university or that institution, be that champion for local food products. And we saw 25 heads, you know, nodding up and down like this. So I mean, they're into it. And we've seen that with hospitals. We work with things like that. It just takes one person to have that passion. They can turn the whole thing around, change the whole direction around. We've seen that in restaurants and things like that. So there's a lot of positive things going on there.
We had someone there last night who came to me. He's a food producer. He's in charge of it. I can't remember where it is. I think it might be Bigger Bowl. And he's like, yeah, and I had a couple of my workers there, and I'm really excited about it. I might finally have gone through them. Because it was a group setting that made it more real for that person. That it wasn't just some crazy idea, but it's actually something the whole community really does care about. They can see it, they can feel it, because they're in a room with people. That was pretty cool.
So,
Tommy, do you have something?
yeah, I think tying together a lot of the recent comments with the concept of sustainability in general, so this kind of philosophical. I mean, we think of this middle piece that's ideal, but all different consumers and different nodes within a value chain, though we have a lot of shared values, you know, there are other different realities and maybe more, not selfish, but important values to that type of consumer or node in the system. And so I don't think there's any perfect middle. And there are certain variables that we might try and maximize in one category, and it's going to negatively impact something else. We've heard some arguments for hyper-local. If we think about carbon per unit of nutrition and hyper-local, it's a really high carbon footprint. And then, ironically, some of our commodity crops per unit of nutrition have a low carbon footprint, but they might be so much worse off on an environmental variable or a social variable, and we talk about abused labor in conventional systems. So I think we have to be creative, and we have to recognize that we might not reach some perfect center, but then we need to be cognizant of what an economist would call these negative externalities. The dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, you know, that is a result of nutrient pollution across an entire watershed that even begins 30 miles from here, right? So I think maybe the final point is, like you said, be creative with all your marketing opportunities. I think a patchwork of some hyper-local, but I think I'm an objective proponent of a more regional scale to provide better food to more people at an affordable price. So I kind of like this creative patchwork idea of farms, ranches, processors, support service industries, and marketing channels.
What do you mean by hyper-local? I didn't hear that term out here, but you've said that in summary.
We heard an example of maybe like a 50-mile radius, production in one valley, you know, or a group of, a small geographic region. I mean, across a lot of the country, people consider within a radius of 400 miles to be local. I mean, that kind of speaks to Montana, what we're dealing with. Other people say local has more to do with the food identity. You know, if I buy farm to market pork, I know the Bratton family pretty well up in Kalispell, you know, but that's not very local by miles to me. But I feel a local identity to that product and how they raise their animals.
That's why I like the term community-based. You know, it does away with the miles problem. To me, it reflects, you know, it still has that feeling of, you know, it's not from a big factory.
I like the made in Montana, grown in Montana.
How would you define the regional scale?
Yeah, so my colleagues on this USDA-funded project, and they just fund our coordination to be able to get some people together to talk about agriculture of the middle. So, for example, and I'll genericize this, there is a meat processor in Idaho that distributes their final product to about 16 states. Okay, they have a conventional line of products, and they have a natural label line of products. They receive animals on the hoof from Montana, Idaho, maybe even the western end of the Dakotas. A lot of that product comes back here to Montana, but their max distribution is 16 states, and they're mostly just highly concentrated in about 6 of the Northern Rockies and Pacific Northwest. So to me, that's an interstate regional. You know, we could also divide our own state up into regions, but normally when I talk with my colleagues in a more academic way, you know, local, most of a state or an entire state, regional would be some hub and then some near neighboring parts of another state. I mean, MSU's buy local program may prioritize a Montana product that travels 500 miles over a product that's grown in northern Idaho that's only 180 miles away. But what's your goal? Is it the social and state level economic goal of Made in Montana, or is it just the most local by a geographic definition?
For that Bratton family pork, that's a farm to market pork out of Kalispell, for our customers, customer in Billings, that fills his need to be local, to market as local products. So
I think you try to get as much Montana food on Montana Place, but in this state we have more capacity than we have people to feed, right? But you look at another way, if we're really talking about values, nationally, 50% of organic crops are imported at this point, right? And so you look at other opportunities. Yeah, feed your local communities, but if you're eastern Montana, you have large acreage, there's no population base. Well, what's the next best thing? Maybe you convert to organic production and there's a market for you. And now you're out of the commodity export business. So it's not one size fits all. It's going to depend where you are in the state, what the population base is. But you're still hitting on values. Maybe not a local numeric delineation, but kind of the same thing.
Scholars of local food systems, I think, almost always say up front, every community, every local food system is different. It has its own needs. It's maximizing or minimizing different variables in a goal to be sustainable. But that, they're very different and personal to that community's needs and opportunities.
We have about 5 minutes remaining in our session here. Can we, in that 5 minutes, define one most important challenge that faces us regarding rebuilding community-based food systems in Montana? What is the biggest challenge we've got to address? Anybody?
Customer demand.
Pardon me, Mac?
Customer demand.
Customer demand.
Changing the
I mean,
mindset.
creating more customer demand. Okay.
Changing the mindset. Sometimes it's not even logistics, it's the headspace.
Is that about the same thing? Customer demand, ultimately?
Yeah.
Policies that prioritize commodities and not specialty crops that include local food. And we need to work on the policy as much as anything else, along with marketing, outreach, connection, networking.
Okay.
But I think policies have to be there as well.
I'd like to change that a little bit, more of a growth mindset person, so I think about what's the opportunity. And when the gal had started talking about glyphosate and all this stuff that's going on, I mean, I think that that's horrible, but we have a huge opportunity to utilize those messages to our advantage, to really, talk about the health aspects and talk about this stuff. And for me, the opportunity of meeting people here today from Western Montana to Eastern Montana, that we're all thinking the same thing, I say we do a lot more together than separately. So I think we have a huge opportunity to join forces and make stuff happen for our industry to feed Montana.
I think I would second that and say my hope would be to see all of us work more collaboratively. Like Janet said, it's a very competitive field. And if instead of competing against each other, we work together to compete against some of these imported and external forces in the market, we're going to be better off.
It's more like competition.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then we all benefit, right?
All right, any other contributions to this?
I think that one thing I noticed on our field trips yesterday is I felt like supply was a problem as well. And I feel like, you know, I'm a small farmer, and I definitely think that rather having some larger scale organic farms or some collaboration within the smaller farms to, you know, reach out to some of these institutions, and I think is really important to just to get more of our food, you know, more access to our food.
And I think that's policy in terms of whether it's hospital purchase policies or procurement policies, that policy is going to be out to be one of the things that's addressed.
That's an interesting potential dichotomy you bring up. I know some niche producers feel like because of their limited production or seasonality, if there wasn't an imported similar product, that even the idea of consuming their product would totally fall off the map. And that was from some group of lamb producers, actually, you know, small and local lamb producers who sort of, if there wasn't some gap filled in by lamb import, that the idea of eating lamb would just totally disappear. That they had this bizarre relationship with needing that.
I think the keynote today, that graph showed there's lots of very small farms, and there's a lot of land in huge farms, and there's no middle anymore. Ag in the middle is gone. And some of that is going to have to come back.
Any other comment? Questions? I want to thank the panel for participating and all of you for participating. Thank you very much. Let's make every day an AERO